Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Michael, and I'm exploring all the different ways that stationery can bring me joy. I'm really excited to have you join me today for a couple reasons. One, I get to introduce a new notebook into my ecosystem that I've kind of hinted at for a little while, as well as kind of do a little bit of a throwback to some of the skills that I used to use all the time as a teacher. I've mentioned on this channel that I am an administrator at a middle school, but before I moved into an admin role, I taught 8th grade English for almost 15 years. Some 6th and 7th sprinkled in there, but mostly 8th grade. And I really loved planning curriculum for my students, trying to kind of take complex ideas, texts, books, and kind of form a plan or a roadmap for the different ways that we would explore those ideas and practice skills and build up to these culminating projects, papers, and events that would go on in my class. There's been a lot of discussion in kind of the planner and journaling community, and then like tangentially related to like the studying and kind of academic community on YouTube about creating personal curriculums. This idea that even once we've finished our formal education, we can kind of plan education for ourselves. And it got me really thinking about something that I've always loved doing, and kind of creating a curriculum for myself to really do a deep dive and really commit to practicing and challenging myself within that hobby, I guess, if you could call it. And so I've been really just excited to explore more in writing poetry. I loved reading and writing poetry when I was in high school. I took some courses in college. And I've always had like random little notebooks where I've scribbled, ideas down, but I never, formally thought to have a place where I could collect all of those things. And, as somebody who was an English teacher and got lots of little notebooks and memo pads and things gifted all the time, I would scribble these things on here, but as I have, taken a deeper dive into the stationery community, I realized that there are, much lovelier containers for all of these things. And so I get to introduce my new standard traveler's notebook in the Love and Trip edition, the red. When I first joined into like watching YouTube videos and other people in the planning and journaling community, a lot of people were doing unboxings of this notebook, and I thought they were so beautiful, and I was so lucky to kind of have put an alert on eBay to kind of see if this would ever pop up at its original price or close to, and I got an alert that a shop that had it, obviously abroad, I think this was actually from Japan, but they had a sale going on or a discount, so with the price they were charging, but the sale on top of it, it was actually the exact price that I would have paid to get it here in America, and so I jumped on that chance. And it took a while to ship here, but I finally got it. I can insert some clips of unboxing this. I didn't want to do a full unboxing just because there are a lot of people who have unboxed this already. But it's beautiful, and I'm very excited to have it join my little journal shelf. Originally, when I got this, I thought this would become my new stationery notebook, but as I mentioned recently, I found this Blackwing on Facebook Marketplace for a steal, and so it felt like the natural place for my stationery planner. to go in. And so instead of a things I love notebook, this is becoming my poetry journal, to kind of finally have one place where I'm putting all of the poetry that I write into one place. I have here a Strand bookstore like charm. I have a little pencil that hangs on the spine, and I've just put the Love and Trip insert to be the insert that I'm going to be writing my poetry in. I have a zipper case to collect any ephemera or things that might be interesting. And I'm toying with the idea of swapping out this grid insert for a sketch one, and perhaps also using this as kind of like a drawing notebook. But for sure, I'll be doing some poetry writing in here. And so I was really excited at the prospect of doing this, but then seeing all of these curriculum and personal curriculum videos on YouTube got me really thinking about how I have like the innate skills to make a personal curriculum as someone who's written curriculum as a teacher, and I wanted to challenge myself to kind of combine my two, one of my hobbies of planning and stationery and all of the things that I do here on this channel, and my career as a teacher and someone who, does understanding by design and backwards planning of curriculum, and marry the two in this video. And so in order to really dedicate myself to, trying out poetry in a more serious way, I thought about how I could plan a curriculum for myself. And so what I did is I first, did some research, and I had this book, The Poet's Companion, from when I did some poetry writing in college. It was like an ancillary text that we used in one of my poetic technique courses, and I think like one or two sections we jumped into. And so I then, and the book is kind of separated into like subjects for writing and craft. I picked up then by one of the authors of this book, Dorianne Lowe, Finger Exercises for Poets. And this book is kind of organized in just kind of things to write about. There's these like topics, and then after explaining the topic, there is an exercise posted at the end. So I thought that this was kind of an excellent extension of the subjects for writing in the Poet's Companion. And then I got Mary Oliver's A Poetry Handbook. And this is kind of just like the basics. And while I do, know some things about poetry and have written poetry, I thought it would be really fun to kind of just like give myself a refresher, and use this as a like kind of, guiding rod for technique in my new personal curriculum of rediscovering poetry and its techniques, its forms, and topics to write about. And so with these three books, my textbooks, I guess, in hand, plus a myriad of, I do own a lot of books by poets, Dorothea Lasky, Gwendolyn Brooks, T.S. Eliot, just to name a few that I have on my shelf. As an English teacher, collect a lot of books, and a lot of those are poetry books. I also have a few anthologies. I've mentioned my husband on here before, but he is also an English educator. He's getting his PhD in medieval literature, and so he's got a lot of books. And so I thought that I would also give myself some kind of time or some time to read poetry by authors as well in this. So these are kind of like my textbooks, and then doing some author or poet studies in here. And so I got really excited about this idea of a personal curriculum, and having reacquainted myself with this book and picked up these two, I knew that it was time to kind of start the planning end of creating this curriculum. And again, I always say that it's kind of shocking that it took me this long to realize how much I would enjoy the planning and stationery community, because as an English teacher and as someone who has collected notebooks and paper almost my whole life, I don't know how I didn't connect these dots. But even as a teacher, I was such an analog planner. I loved to create my unit plans on paper or chart paper first, and then type them up if I had to submit them digitally. So I brought a sample of this moleskin notebook that was just blank paper, and you can kind of see, this is kind of a big notebook, and hopefully I'm in frame, but how I would brainstorm different topics or things that I wanted, and then would turn it into this elaborate like overview calendar. And then my lesson plans obviously would break these down even more, but kind of just like really going through and thinking about what each lesson's topic would be, kind of leading myself up. And as somebody who, studied curriculum design in my grad program, and then learning it from mentors and other people, when I first started out, there's these researchers who have a style for planning, understanding by design, or a methodology, and that's that you begin with the big picture and then the end in mind. And so it's always like, what are students doing at the end, so that you can think how you backwards plan or go backwards, right, to get them there. So it's like, if I want them to write a specific type of paper, what are the skills and, the knowledge and discrete skills they need in order to do that, and how am I then planning lessons that will give them practice at those discrete skills, and they can build them up and gather it all together to create that final product. And so knowing that this is the kind of way that I planned curriculum for myself, I thought it would be kind of fun in this idea of creating a personal curriculum or a personal course of study in poetry to do this again. And so I jumped immediately into thinking about what my goals for this unit of study or this semester of study would be, and I popped out one of my many random little notebooks. This is just a Muji grid notebook, and first I thought, if I'm beginning with the end in mind, what are my goals here? And so I thought to have really concrete, actionable, real world goals for my poetry hobby would be to kind of share that poetry, or try to, get it evaluated, or write enough poetry that I could maybe submit it somewhere. And so I created goals for myself of, one, submit to at least 2 poetry competitions or journals. I get emails all the time as someone who's a member of the Poetry Foundation, and just as a teacher, about adult-oriented places where you can submit poems. Write enough poems that I could complete a revised chapbook of poetry, and that's about anywhere from 10 to 20 poems that I would, on a theme or in a collection that I would create. And this one was kind of nerve-wracking for me, but I asked my students to push myself all the time, I asked my students to push themselves all the time in our schools to perform a poem at an open mic night of some sort. And that's going to be a big one for me, to really push myself to do that. And so with these 3 goals in mind, I started thinking about, and the textbooks or the texts that I kind of pulled for myself, like a structure of what this would look like. And then I, started thinking about, what I would need to do to complete these is, 1, have a lot of poems to pull from to complete a chapbook, and revise them to submit, right? To choose some to submit at least twice, so 2 points throughout this semester where I'm submitting poems. And then I would need practice reading poems out loud and getting poems revised to be performed. And so I thought about, I would need to probably watch some poetry performances. I would need to write a lot of poems, and in order to do that, I could use the books as kind of a structure to get there. And knowing that there are the books are kind of organized as topics to write about, and then also poetic craft or technique. I thought about how I can expose myself to these different techniques and different topics to write about cyclically to get myself to the end. And I knew that I would need a calendar to do that, and so I realized I also have this Muji notebook that is just a blank monthly spread. I purchased this recently because I have one of these at school that I use to photocopy when I am working with teachers to have them think out loud. As an analog planner, I just love having paper that I can whip out, and sometimes I'll photocopy this, other times I will literally just make a grid on paper to work with them. And so I thought it would be a really great idea to kind of take this notebook and use it as a way to, if it's a semester starting from this week all the way till December, kind of map out what I would want my curriculum to look like. And so I then realized that I'm kind of using Muji products, so I decided to use a Muji pen, and then I kind of gathered all the little Muji things that I've collected, some Post-it note tabs and a set of Muji markers. So instead of using my, trusty Tombos, I decided, let me go on theme and just use Muji and almost kind of make this a challenge, curriculum planning, just using my Muji products, because why not make it a little fun and have a theme as well as I'm doing it. So that is kind of like the overview of what I wanted to do, and I think I'm just going to sit down and crack this open and kind of like plan and let voiceover Michael and some nice tunes play in the background and kind of walk you through what I'm doing, and then we can see what it looks like once I complete it, and kind of talk through my goals once I have my calendared out plan. So to get started, I wanted to take out my Muji markers. I had the idea to kind of color code different aspects of the plan. I decided on red for deadlines. If this was a unit plan for my teaching, this would be kind of like any projects, tests, deliverables for me and my purpose in writing more poetry and gearing myself up to perform it. I'm kind of putting in when I want to have benchmarks for, around 5 poems that I want to have chosen for revision, ones that I really want to get to a more polished place, as well as when I will be doing some reflections. On the side of some weeks, I decided to use these Post-it flags to put in some deadlines for going to go watch some poetry be performed, and then in the last few weeks of this semester, quote unquote, when I will go to an open mic night to perform. And you'll see I kind of add those flags throughout on the side because I don't know the exact day, but I know that I want it to at least be in that week. Now I'm beginning kind of going through and scheduling out when I'm going to be doing some work in the books that are going to be kind of guiding me. I decided on blue for more craft or technique practices, imagery, focusing on the line, rhyme, meter, and then I'm using green to highlight days where I'm going to be just working on topics or things to write about. So on that first Saturday, one of the books has a section on writing about family, and so I put that there and underlined it in green. Orange I've decided to use as kind of like a marker for just reading, so the intro chapters for each of these books I put as readings for my first day of study, and then anytime I'm doing a poetry deep dive on a poet, I've underlined in orange, and I'm going to go and backfill the poet because I just want to do a little bit more research as to which poet would match the things that I'm focused on. So, for example, in this first month, I'm focusing a lot on imagery, or not the first month, but the month I'm currently writing on. And so thinking about which poet would be a good deep dive for that, to read their poetry. You'll notice that I'm focusing a lot of this on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. As I mentioned, my husband is getting a PhD. He also adjuncts his classes. He has one every day of the week this semester, but his Tuesday and Thursday courses are further away in New Jersey, so he won't get home until later in the evening after his commute. And so I figure for this semester, that's a great time for me to focus on working in my poetry notebook and completing these explorations, because I'll get home from work, and after taking care of the dog, making sure there's a plan for dinner, I'll have an hour of time to kind of devote to this. Maybe I won't even need the whole hour, but I'll have some time to kind of set aside. And so now I'm just kind of getting into a cadence of what I want this learning plan to look like. So I'm realizing, Tuesdays and Thursdays I will have some time, but it's not a lot of time. I think 30 minutes would be ideal. And so I am thinking about what craft lessons I can be popping into the book and maybe writing one poem on those days, and then allowing Saturday to kind of be the time where I do larger topics of what to write about, and then in the sections of the books that have those kinds of topics, they have poetry exercises, sometimes up to 12 different exercises listed. So I'm scheduling out on Saturdays to do 3 of those exercises. And then I'm also making sure that I'm spacing things out. So maybe on one Saturday I'll start with the section on what to write about called witnessing, and I'll read the introduction and do 2 poems, and then the next Saturday I'll just do 3 more exercises from that section, to allow myself opportunity to try all the different prompts and exercises that are listed in the book. And because this curriculum is not necessarily a deep dive into the introduction of poetry, I'm not necessarily reading up on the practice of poems or really doing a super in-depth study of simile or different sort of technique, but just kind of popping through multiple sessions, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 on the techniques, and spending some time, longer time on the Saturdays on the topics to write about. I've abbreviated the books to kind of make it easy to write into the monthly area, so I just kind of made an acronym using the title, and making sure that I'm including page numbers so that when I go to do some of this work, it'll be really easy. It's almost, no thinking involved as far as the setup. I'm going here, I'm reading this page, and I'm getting that information done. And because this course of study is mostly just about kind of sparking my creativity and getting me to just write a lot of poems, I think that this plan will kind of achieve that. Obviously, I've made a couple of errors, putting down things on the wrong day of the week or on a calendar square that didn't have a date because it's technically the next month. So I have my whiteout runner to help me there. I'm also making sure that I am including some points of reflection throughout. So there are a couple of times where, after going to my first poetry open house, or after I choose some poems to revise, just kind of reflecting on what that experience was like, to kind of also have a meta moment in my learning, and be able to reflect on how I'm learning and how I'm doing. And that's something that I think is important for all learners, to not only do the learning, but to stop and have a pause point and think about how is it going and what course corrections kind of need to go, or what do I need to focus on. So yeah, I'm pretty much getting to a really great cadence of putting in these topics to write. And as I get into November and closer to December, I'm also going to start to add, there are in 2 of the texts that I've chosen to use, like quick prompts or 20-minute prompts. And after I've done all of the larger kind of explorations that the books have to offer, just on these Tuesdays and Thursdays, kind of allowing myself time to just do quick prompts to kind of, quickly create more poetry. The more I have written down, the more I have to choose from to revise, edit, and, get to a place. Ultimately, I, have no pipe dreams of anything that I submit to be published actually being published. This is more of an exploration of just going through the process. I've always wondered what it's like to submit something to be published, and to just, create a lot of poems and to end up with a collection that, even if it's just for my eyes only, I can be really proud of. And I think practicing reading poems aloud to friends or my husband and really pushing myself to this open mic night will be a really fun experience. And so that is kind of the theory behind what I've planned, and the system that I've used in this notebook. And so now I have kind of a layout for this semester, and I might just do a little bit of decorating to make it nice. All right, welcome back. The curriculum is done. I put a little cover on the notebook just so I can distinguish it if I ever have the other one back. I added some washi and the months. These are Muji masking tapes, but they're pretty much just like washi tapes. And then I used the Post-it flags to write the months, and then just added some stickers that I had. And yeah, I'm really excited to have this kind of laid out. The 3 goals that I planned out at the beginning are here at the end, for kind of me to work up to. And I feel like I've done a really good job of building myself up over time to get there. I didn't show this in the intro, but I had kind of sat down and thought about the different techniques that were talked about in either the Mary Oliver book or the Poet's Companion, and then the different ideas and topics for writing poems that the Poet's Companion and the finger exercises for poets have listed out. And I kind of listed them to kind of get a sense, wrote down how much time I had in the semester, and then, as you can see, I made the decision to kind of start off with these major techniques and some topics until the major techniques were done, and then it just goes into more topics and quick writing exercises. So it's like a little foundational with some writing to just kind of pouring out a lot of poems. I'm excited to, finish this up with a little bit of research on which poets I want to study during the times that I've set aside for some poet study. And I made sure that the first time that I did that, I included the chapter in the Poet's Handbook about imitation to kind of get her thoughts on that as I move into those poet studies. I know that a personal curriculum is like ever growing. I'll finish this poetry semester, and I'm excited that I have lots of space to continue on whatever it is that I'm going to continue. And maybe that's something more craft-based, like writing poetry, or it's something more knowledge-based, like learning new information. But yeah, I am really excited that I have this kind of mapped out. I have my first assignment coming up, and I'm very excited to have this poetry notebook to work in as kind of like a new space to practice an old passion of mine that I get to renew. I think it's also just really great, as I mentioned earlier, that I get to kind of combine one of the skills I have from my job with a hobby and merge it with another of my hobbies. And so I am looking forward to this fall semester kind of really getting back into all of this. Thank you so much for joining me. I would love to hear about your experience with planning a personal curriculum. Is this the first time you're hearing about it? Is this something that you have done for yourself? What does that look like for you? And this might be a little bit more regimented, but as somebody who has spent almost now 20 years of my life regimenting things out for students, it's kind of the natural way that it came to me. I would love to know what kind of topics or things you're studying, if you have a personal curriculum, or if this video inspired you into maybe starting one, what you'd be thinking about, or maybe what you could plan as a personal curriculum. Please join me in the comments below and let me know. I hope that you have a great rest of the day. I hope that you keep learning, and I hope that you find the joy and the possibility in a blank piece of paper. Until next time, bye-bye.